Hey guys, Dustin here. Welcome to another episode of Horroritis. Today we're looking at an indie movie called Tales from 6 Feet Under. A while ago, I reviewed a movie by Nicholas Michael Jacobs called Night. In that review, I said, "There's nothing wrong with this movie that couldn't be fixed by just making more movies, and I hope to see more movies from this guy." Since then, he's made a movie called Urban Fears, which I didn't review because I have a horrible tendency to be inconsistent, and this movie, Tales from 6 Feet Under, which I am reviewing. So, there's that. Tales from 6 Feet Under is a horror anthology that tells the story of 3 different people who ended up, wait for it, 6 feet under. Each story is presented to us by a being called the Visitor. He leads us through the cemetery and points us to the appropriate tombstone for the story. The Visitor himself is a clear homage to characters like the Creep from Creepshow. This is made even clearer with the self-referential comic book which appears later on in the movie, which I thought was pretty cool. The first story is about Joe Roth, who finds a Ouija board while cleaning out his basement. He ignores his dad's warnings not to touch it and meets a pretty predictable fate. The story itself isn't exactly original, but there's only so many Ouija board stories that you can tell. The dialogue is a little rough, but that's to be expected. The Ouija board itself, however, it looks brand new. Like, I would be willing to bet that when they shot this segment, the outer plastic wrapping for the Ouija board was still sitting in the trash can. What made this segment pay off for me was the demon. Not only was the use of backlighting and shadow a good way to compensate for what I assume would be lack of a budget, but it also had this 1950s rubber suit monster feel, and I don't know if it was supposed to, but it does, and that made me a little bit happy. The second story follows Sam Hooper, who is a writer who's trying to write a horror screenplay, and then things get weird when he receives a ventriloquist dummy in the mail. The concept for this is actually pretty cool. We get to see this guy brainstorming his ideas, but then we actually get to see the ideas play out on screen as he brainstorms them. The only problem there is that he's imagining himself in all of these situations, so it gets a little difficult to follow the narrative when the transition from reality to brainstorm isn't as clear as it could be, and again, it becomes kind of difficult to follow. Overall, though, the dummy gives it kind of a campy feel without being overtly ridiculous, which for me is a big plus. The ending to this segment is actually pretty satisfying, even when you really don't think it's going to be, because I really didn't think it was going to be, and then it paid off for me, and yeah, pretty satisfying. The last tale is of Jennifer Burton, who has to spend her birthday alone, and she spends it texting a stranger. This segment has no dialogue. The whole thing is done with text. Alexis Beecher, who plays Jennifer, does a pretty good job of not saying anything, which isn't as easy as you would think, except for one or two kind of overly dramatic faces she pulls. The whole thing is pretty well done. Only problem I have with it is I don't think we need to see every single word typed out. In fact, they probably could have gotten away with not seeing anything typed out. I mean, it's not a deal breaker for me, it's just too many thumbs. The whole thing comes to a conclusion when the stranger she's been texting all night actually shows up at her house, and as you can probably imagine, that goes pretty much one way. Comparing this movie to his first movie, Nicholas Michael Jacobs has come a long way. Both movies I've reviewed, I've gone in thinking I knew what I was getting myself into, and both times I was pleasantly surprised. Just like the last movie, the problems with this movie could all most likely be resolved with just practice and experience. This movie is well worth the relatively short runtime of 45 minutes, and it is available right now on Amazon Prime. I would encourage you all to check it out if you can. So that's my review for Tales from 6 Feet Under. If you have a movie that you've made or know somebody who has made a movie and you would like me to give it a fair and honest review, drop me an email at thehorroritis@gmail.com. I'd be glad to take a look at it. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. We are available on YouTube, Facebook, and BitChute. Check us out on any of those platforms. I do pop up on Twitter sometimes, just not very often. And as far as I know, that is all I had to say to you today. So, as always, I'm Dustin, this was Horroritis, and until next time, keep it creepy.